Information integrity is the mother of all battles. I wanted to get that out before I forgot, because I think it's a very good way to put it. That's the words of Nobel Laureate Maria Ressa, and she's just spoken to the UN General Assembly. Now, there's a lot of things that came out of that UN General Assembly that's worth commentary, but I will be touching on some of them. It's obviously going to be impossible to touch on everything. For this particular video, I want to focus on her speech. If you don't know who Maria Ressa is, if you're a Filipino, of course you'll know who she is. But if you don't know, she won the Nobel Peace Prize, I believe, in either 2021 or 2020. I'm not sure the exact year. But anyway, she is an investigative journalist and she is known for the publication Rappler. And because of her scrutiny of the Duterte administration, Duterte and frankly his thugs went after her. I think that the battle of disinformation, it certainly has affected the Philippines, but it's not unique to the Philippines. It's affected this country as well. You know, it's not even something that just develops, just affects developing countries or countries that are in other parts of the world unstable. I'm not saying the Philippines is, but it's a worldwide problem. We see this in Western countries. We see this in developed countries, in Germany, in Britain, in the United States. Um, I've cited my deep distrust of Elon Musk. Well, it's not just distrust. I don't trust the man. I think he's a very toxic character. When Musk comes in and addresses a crowd in London and says, "Stand, get ready to fight or die," when he talks about civil war in this country, that's inflammatory nonsense. It really is. Now, Maria Ressa, like I say, she was known for investigative journalism in the Philippines, and the Duterte administration tried to get her shut down. He has now been indicted by the International Criminal Court. His supporters were up in arms about that, but many, many Filipinos welcomed it. That's the truth. Many Filipinos welcomed it because Duterte's controversial war on drugs involved a lot of extrajudicial killings. That's the reality. Now, from what I've seen of Duterte's supporters, I've had a little bit of interaction with them. They are not objective thinkers. They just lash out at anyone who dares say anything against their leader. There's no objective thinking there, and it's very dangerous. We see this in other parts of the world, certainly with Trumpism in the United States, with Putinism in Russia, with Bolsonaro in Brazil. There's many examples of these strongmen, not necessarily dictators. Putin certainly is, but in many of these cases, these strongmen have been democratically elected. There is a democratic mandate there, but they've abused that power, and it's a dangerous situation we're in the world today because there's a lot of autocrats out there. As Georgia Maloney pointed out, and I'll mention this in case I, evade to mention in other videos, there's apparently 56 armed conflicts in the world today, which is more than any time since World War II. That includes lots of lower level conflicts, but nevertheless 56 conflicts. The world is quite chaotic right now. There's no point pretending otherwise. But to Maria Ressa's speech, she was speaking about how it's critical that humans control AI. She cited Pope Leo XIV, who has also stressed this point, and I think he's absolutely right. I do have concerns about AI. I have concerns about how it can be utilised. We know some of it's very realistic. Now, I'm not 100% against it. Some AI can be very creative. It can be, and that can be relatively harmless when it's used for artistic purposes, in the sense of, when you know what you're getting. This is AI, and this is, you see all sorts of material coming out that's impressive. Visually, it's impressive. In that sense, we could compare it perhaps to the development of CGI or special effects in movies. But the danger with AI, of course, is how it's utilised at a political level and how it's utilised by websites, because a lot of it's still uncharted territory. And I feel, as a general rule, technology can be utilised by people, but we should never overly rely on it. I believe very strongly in that. Over reliance on technology can actually cause stress for consumers when it doesn't work. But there's more pressing problems where we don't know how far this stuff can go. I just think it's uncharted territory. Maria Ressa and the Pope and others are right to express concerns about how this is utilised. It doesn't mean it's all bad, but it has to be utilised in a responsible way, and that's the danger. I don't accept this notion of, well, there's nothing we could do about it. There is, if there's political willpower, there is, if companies decide, okay, we're going to use this technology, but we're going to keep a check on it. We're not going to let it get out of hand. There's all sorts of issues around algorithms, and I'd be a liar if I said I understood all the technical side of it. It's a pretty complex subject. So no, I don't understand all of it, but I am convinced it needs to be kept in check to some level. Um, this point that she was stressing about disinformation is critical now. In the 2022 Filipino election, there was definitely disinformation peddled. Marcos won the election. It's Philippines is a democracy, but every democracy, including this country. So, any Marcos or Duterte supporting Filipinos who think I'm, picking on them. No, I'm not. This is a problem in every country, including mine. Disinformation. We've definitely seen it in the United States. Well, in that campaign, Marcos absolutely whitewashed the history of his father's dictatorship, despite the fact that it's within living memory there was a people power revolution and thousands removed the corrupt Marcos dictatorship from power. And it was incredibly corrupt. Imelda Marcos and her husband bankrupted the Philippines, made it a poor country when it should have been a wealthy country. And a lot of people suffered from that regime. They were tortured, there were disappearances. It was propped up by the West because Marcos Sr. was a useful ally in the Cold War. Now, I don't think his son is anywhere near as bad. And if I were a Filipino and it was a choice between Marcos or Duterte, I'd probably choose Marcos, but I'm an outsider. It's not up to me to say that. Regardless, he didn't even show up to the presidential debate. I saw it. I watched the presidential debate. He didn't even show up to that. There was a lot of disinformation in that campaign, particularly around whitewashing his father's record. And we're seeing now, the Gen Z protests in Manila. I said to my girlfriend, could this happen in the Philippines? And she said she was raising this issue. I was thinking, could this happen in the Philippines? What's happened in Nepal? And right enough, it has. So far, the violence has been somewhat maintained to Manila, and as far as I know, there hasn't been any deaths. But the government has to react to this. Of course, many people say Marcos himself is corrupt. I don't know if he is or not. I wouldn't be surprised. But this is not something that just impacts developing countries. In France, Nicolas Sarkozy, former President Sarkozy, has just been sentenced to 5 years in prison for corruption. So we see a pattern around the world where there is disillusionment in governments. In Britain, it's not necessarily abject corruption, but what we see is sleaze. We see people disappointed, to put it mildly, certainly in this Labour government. I mean, this year alone, we've had Rushanara Ali had to resign. The housing minister, when she fired her own tenant, she also has had jurisdiction over the homelessness issue. We had Tulip Siddiq, who had to go because of her ties to Sheikh Hasina's government in Bangladesh. We had the Peter Mandelson thing over Jeffrey Epstein, and then, of course, Angela Rayner. 4 key Labour figures gone in a year. So it's not necessarily straightforward corruption, but I think there is sleaze, and this is precisely what toppled the Tories in 2024. Now Labour, they really need to show that they're different, and so far they failed to do so in that sense. But what she says about disinformation, she says that all the other problems that we face, she mentioned gender-based problems, she mentioned threats to free press, all of this stuff, it comes down to this battle with information and how, as she put it, information integrity. I know that she's not loved by everyone in the Philippines. There are people who think she's just a troublemaker. She is, she's politically biased and all the rest of it. I'll be quite honest, I think she's courageous. I think she deserves a lot of credit for being a voice of dissent, because in a democracy you have to have a free press. Rappler, I think, has done some very important work. And what I would say to people who don't like Maria Ressa, you don't have to like her. You don't have to like what Rappler publishes. But this is part of democracy. You have to have a free press. That includes editorial lines you might not like. But investigative journalism is absolutely critical in a democracy. So the Philippines is a democracy. It's a great country. It's a country I have a lot of affection for. But I just hope it doesn't return to the days of the past. And I think Maria Ressa and others are safeguarding that democracy. So she deserves credit. I think she absolutely deserves the Nobel Peace Prize. Some people, are dubious, but she definitely deserved it. Um, she also pointed out the threat to journalists in the world today. I didn't even know this, although it doesn't surprise me. 240 journalists killed in Gaza. That is a horrendous figure. That's worse than World War One, World War Two, the Korean War, Vietnam, and several other conflicts combined. Just in Gaza in the last 2 years. Shame on those who support Israel. Shame on those who continue to defend what Israel's doing. So anyway, there'll be other things to say about the UN and the big elephant in the room about the UN's relevance at 80 years. But I'm going to put a link to this speech. I think it was a good speech. I think it's a very important speech. And like I said, I'm not naive. I know she's not loved by everyone in the Philippines. They may take a different view about her compared to outsiders. But, coming from... I have an interest in journalism. I never actually broke through into that market, but I did take a course in journalism. And I passionately believe in the merits or the principles of a free press. I believe in human rights. Of course I'm going to respect someone like Maria Ressa. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Disinformation is a problem around the world. And what Musk is doing, and this is why I think he's dangerous, is he stokes up disinformation in our democracies. And people think it's harmless because they think, well, he shares my worldview, so the disinformation's harmless. But of course they won't even see it as disinformation. When the likes of Musk and Steve Bannon talk about civil war in this country, who the hell is that helping? We're not in civil war. We're not even close. But what this disinformation can do, I mean, we know it from last year, the riots. We know that disinformation can incite violence. That's a fact. And I feel that the free speech issue, whilst extremely important, whilst it must be safeguarded, can also be manipulated to support disinformation, because people who are pushing this will say it's just free speech. But speech has to be responsible, and spreading disinformation is not responsible. I'll wrap this up. I will definitely be making more videos on the UN General Assembly, but I'll put a link and that it speak for itself. I think it was a good speech by Maria Ressa. There was also a speech by another Nobel Laureate, Nadia Murad. I haven't seen that yet. But DRM, it's a good source. They have a lot of speeches, and it's not just the big countries. It's including a lot of smaller states as well. It's one thing about the UN: everyone gets a say. Now, how much action happens is another matter, but everyone gets a say.